At my daughter's wedding, her fiancé introduced me to his boss as an unemployed loser. His boss looked at me, smiled, and said, "Nice to meet you, partner." The fiancé was speechless with shock. On my daughter's wedding day, her cocky groom introduced me to his boss as an unemployed loser. The groom fell silent when his boss smiled, patted me on the shoulder, and said, "Good to see you, partner." Then he turned to the groom with a chilling, "You're fired." The groom was speechless with shock. The waiter led us to a corner table at Lakeview Grill, and I watched Derek Harrington smooth his tie before sitting down. Nancy beamed at both of us, her engagement ring catching the soft restaurant lighting. "So, Mr. Wood," Derek began, not waiting for our drinks to arrive. "Nancy tells me you're between opportunities right now." I blinked. Between opportunities. The phrase hung in the air like expensive cologne, overwhelming and unnecessary. "I'm retired," I said simply, unfolding my napkin. Derek's smile widened, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Right, of course. Well, I work at Technova Innovations, leading AI solutions company in the Midwest. I'm senior manager of corporate sales." "Sounds impressive." I kept my voice neutral. "How long have you been there?" 3 years now. I've increased my department sales by 40%. Derek leaned back, clearly expecting admiration. "What field were you in, Mr. Wood?" "Nothing special, really. Just business." Nancy touched dear Eric's arm gently. "Dad's being modest. He always says that." Derek nodded knowingly. "I see. Well, the main thing is staying healthy at your age, right? Keeping busy with hobbies." My fingers tightened slightly around my water glass. "At my age." The condescension dripped from his words like honey from a broken jar. "Hobbies keep me occupied," I agreed. The waiter appeared, pen ready. Derek ordered the pan-seared salmon with truffle risotto. Nancy chose the herb-roasted chicken. I glanced at the menu briefly. "I'll take the soup and sandwich combo, please." Dear Eric's eyebrows rose fractionally. "The soup special." "Dad, are you sure? This is supposed to be celebratory." NY's cheeks flushed pink. "Derek, it's fine. Dad likes simple food." "Of course. Of course." Dear Eric waved his hand dismissively. "Everyone has different budgets." "I totally understand." The word budgets landed like a slap. He understood, did he? This 34-year-old middle manager understood my financial situation based on a soup order. "Tell me about Technova," I said, steering the conversation away from my supposed poverty. "What kind of AI solutions?" Dear Eric's chest puffed up visibly. "Cutting-edge stuff. Machine learning algorithms for corporate efficiency. Predictive analytics, automated decision trees. We're revolutionizing how businesses operate." "Fascinating." The company's been around long, about 30 years, but they really took off in the last decade. Before that, probably just another garage startup, you know. Now, we're pulling in serious revenue. Derek cut into his salmon with surgical precision. "I'm actually on track for a promotion to department director, maybe even regional manager after that." Nancy smiled proudly. Dear Eric's incredibly driven. He works 60-hour weeks sometimes. 60 hours? I raised an eyebrow. "That's dedication. Success requires sacrifice, Mr. Wood. That's something my generation understands." Derek's tone suggested my generation understood very little. The business world moves fast now. You have to adapt or get left behind. I took a spoonful of my soup. Surprisingly good tomato bisque. Change can be challenging. Exactly. That's why I stay current with industry trends, attend seminars, network constantly. It's not enough to just coast through life anymore. Derek gestured with his fork. People your age, no offense, sometimes get stuck in old patterns. The world's different now. Nancy shifted uncomfortably. Derek means things have evolved since Dad's time. Right. Evolution. I nodded slowly. Survival of the fittest and all that. Dear Eric missed the edge in my voice entirely. Precisely. Companies like Technova reward innovation and results. Old school thinking doesn't cut it anymore. We need fresh perspectives, aggressive strategies, and you provide those. Absolutely. My department's numbers speak for themselves. 40% growth doesn't happen by accident. Derek leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, some of the older employees there are, well, let's say they're not keeping up. Dead weight, if you're honest about it. Dead weight, I filed that phrase away carefully. The older employees must have experience, though, I suggested mildly. Derek shrugged. Experience without adaptation is just stagnation. The company would probably be better off replacing half the senior staff with hungry young talent. Nancy laughed nervously. Dear Eric's very passionate about efficiency. Passion drives results, Dear Eric continued, warming to his theme. That's what separates winners from, he glanced at my soup bowl. Well, from people who settle for less. The insult hung between us like smoke. People who settle for less. People like me, apparently. The unemployed old man ordering soup while his daughter's successful fiancé enjoyed truffle risotto. I set down my spoon deliberately. The metal clinked against ceramic with surprising sharpness. Settling can be a choice, I said quietly. Derek didn't hear the warning in my tone. He was too busy savoring his victory over the pathetic old man across the table. Derek wiped his mouth with his napkin, clearly energized by what he perceived as my surrender. The salmon on his plate was barely half finished-ish, but he'd already moved into full lecture mode. You know what, Mr. Wood, I respect that you're trying to stay positive about your situation. His voice carried that particular tone people use when talking to children or the elderly, but have you considered consulting with your experience? There might be opportunities. Experience is interesting, I replied carefully. Sometimes it teaches you to stay quiet and observe, but you can't just observe forever. Dear Eric's enthusiasm bordered on aggressive. You have to move forward. Take action. I mean, look at me. I plan to become department director within a year, regional manager within 3. You have to set goals, create timelines. Nancy nodded encouragingly. Dear Eric's very goal-oriented. Goals are important. I agreed, though sometimes the most important ones aren't obvious to outsiders. Derek completely missed the implication. Exactly. That's why you need to put yourself out there. Network. Meet people. Let them know you're available. I could introduce you to some contacts if you want. Maybe entry-level positions. Nothing too demanding. Entry-level positions for me. The irony was so thick I could have served it for dessert. That's very generous, I said. It's about giving back, you know, helping those less fortunate. Dear Eric's voice dripped with magnanimity. Successful people have a responsibility to lift others up. Nancy beamed at him. See, Dad, Derek really cares about people. Oh, I can tell. I took a sip of water. Your compassion is quite evident. Derek pined under what he took as praise. It's not about the money for me, Mr. Wood. Don't get me wrong, the 6-figure salary is nice, but it's about making a difference. Building something meaningful. 6 figures. He said it like he was announcing the cure for cancer. Building something meaningful, I repeated, like Technova itself was built. Well, sure, but that was different. The founders back then were just lucky, I guess. Right place, right time. The real innovation is happening now with people like me pushing the envelope. Lucky. 30 years of 18-hour days, missed family dinners, and constant financial stress reduced to luck. The founders were lucky, I said slowly. Had to be. I mean, what did they really know about AI back then? The technology barely existed? They probably just stumbled into success. Derek laughed, the sound grating against my ears. Now we're the ones doing the real work, turning their accidental success into something professional. Nancy sensed the tension building, but misread its source. Dad, Derek just wants to help. He knows the job market is tough for people starting over. Starting over? As if my entire career had been erased, leaving me to begin again from scratch like a college graduate. Starting over can be liberating, I said, my voice carefully controlled. It gives you perspective on what really matters. Absolutely, Derek seized on this. That's the attitude you need. Fresh start, new opportunities. You just have to be realistic about your limitations. My limitations? The phrase hung in the air like a challenge. What limitations would those be? I asked quietly. Derek gestured vaguely. Well, age is a factor. Technology moves fast. It's hard for older workers to keep up. Plus, most companies want people who can grow with them long-term. Long-term growth? Am I amused? Like 30 years? Exactly. See, you're getting it. Derek was pleased with his students' progress. Though obviously starting at your age, you're looking at maybe 5-10 years a maximum before retirement. Companies invest in futures, he caught himself. Not what? Not short-term situations, he finished lamely. Nancy reached across the table toward my hand. Dad, maybe we should talk about something else. But Dear Eric was on a roll now, his voice growing more passionate. The thing is, Mr. Wood, the business world rewards drive and ambition. It's not enough to just show up anymore. You need vision, innovation, the ability to disrupt existing paradigms. Disrupt paradigms, I echoed. Right? Like what I'm doing at Technova. The old guard there, they're stuck in outdated methodologies. They think because they've been around since the beginning, they know everything. But markets evolve. Customer needs change. Sometimes you have to tear down the old systems to build something better. Tear down the old systems built by lucky founders who stumbled into success. I placed my napkin on the table with deliberate precision. The gesture was quiet, but something in it made Derek pause mid-sentence. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I think I need some air." "Dad," NY's voice carried genuine concern. "Are you okay?" "Just tired," I replied, pulling out my wallet. I placed $40 on the table, enough to cover my soup and sandwich, plus tip. This should handle my portion. Derek's eyes widened slightly at the cash. "Mr. Wood, you don't have to." "I insist." I straightened my jacket. "Thank you for dinner and for the career advice." Nancy half rose from her chair. "Dad, please don't leave." Derek didn't mean Derek meant exactly what he said. I looked directly at my daughter's fiancé and I heard every word. The drive from downtown Chicago to my house in Evanston gave me 45 minutes to process what had just happened. Derek's words echoed in my mind with each mile. Lucky founders, dead weight, starting over at your age. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the initial anger had crystallized into something much more dangerous. Cold, calculated purpose. I unlocked the front door and headed straight to my study. This room was my sanctuary, carefully arranged to tell the real story of my life, the story Derek Harrington had no idea existed. The walls were lined with framed photographs and awards that I kept hidden from casual visitors. Technova's incorporation papers from 1995 signed by Walter Klein and myself. Photos from our first successful product launch. Industry recognition awards spanning 3 decades. The Forbes article from 2018 calling me the quiet revolutionary of AI innovation. I sank into my leather chair and stared at the photograph on my desk. Walter and me in that cramped garage where it all began. We looked so young, so determined, 30 years old and absolutely convinced we could change the world. We'd been right. I picked up my phone and dialed Walter's number. He answered on the second ring as always. "Porter, how was dinner with the future son-in-law?" "Enlightening," I said carefully. "How are things at the company?" "Same as always when you're not here. Chaos and confusion." Walter's laugh was warm. "Seriously, though, everything's running smoothly. The quarterly reports look excellent. When are you coming back from this retirement experiment?" "Still enjoying the break, old friend." "Well, enjoy it while you can." Derek Harrington in sales has been making noise about wanting more responsibility. Kid's ambitious. I'll give him that. My hand tightened on the phone. "Derek Harrington, you know him?" "Senior sales manager. Been with us 3 years. Actually has some decent ideas, but he's got that hungry look that makes me nervous. Keeps talking about modernizing our approach and disrupting outdated paradigms." Disrupting outdated paradigms. The same phrase he'd used an hour ago. "What kind of disruption?" I asked. "Oh, the usual young hotshot stuff. Thinks the company would be more efficient without so much legacy thinking. Wants to restructure departments, bring in fresh talent. Yesterday he suggested we might be carrying too much senior dead weight." Senior dead weight. There it was again. "Interesting perspective," I managed. "Between you and me, Porter, I think he sees himself running this place someday. Can't decide if that's admirable ambition or dangerous arrogance." I stared at the photograph of our garage startup days. "Maybe both. Probably. Anyway, his sales numbers are solid, so I can't complain too much. The board loves him." Walter paused. "You sure you don't want to come back?" "I miss having someone around who remembers why we started this company." "I remember perfectly," I said quietly. "That's exactly why I'm staying away a little longer." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and pulled up Technova's latest financial statements. 30 years of growth, innovation, and careful stewardship. Annual revenue now approaching $200 million. Over 800 employees across 4 states. All of it dismissed by Derek Harrington as lucky stumbling. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time all evening. Derek wanted to disrupt paradigms. He wanted to eliminate dead weight. Perfect. I'd give him exactly what he was asking for. The wedding was scheduled for June 15th. 4 months to let Derek continue believing he'd correctly assessed my worth. 4 months to watch him display his true character to Nancy, to the family, to everyone who mattered. 4 months to plan the most educational experience of his arrogant young life. I pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. Derek's comments about the founders, his dismissal of experienced employees, his condescending advice about entry-level positions. Every insult, every assumption, every moment of casual cruelty needed to be remembered and addressed. The man wanted to tear down old systems and build something better. Excellent. I'd let him try. I picked up the garage photograph again, studying Walter's younger face beside mine. We'd built Technova with our bare hands, sacrificing everything for a vision that seemed impossible to everyone else. We'd earned every success, survived every failure, and created something that outlasted the predictions of every expert who'd written us off. Derek Harrington thought experience without adaptation was stagnation. Soon he'd learned what 3 decades of adaptation looked like when it was directed at a very specific target. I closed the laptop and headed upstairs, already planning tomorrow's activities. I had a persona to maintain, a deception to perfect, and a lesson to prepare. Derek wanted to see what happened when successful people help those less fortunate. He was about to find out. 2 weeks had passed since that illuminating dinner. I'd spent the time exactly as Derek would expect, reading newspapers on my front porch, tending my small garden, playing the role of the aimless retiree perfectly. When I heard the car pull into my driveway that Tuesday afternoon, I was ready. Through my living room window, I watched Derek emerge from his BMW, straightening his expensive suit jacket. Nancy bounded up my front steps with obvious excitement, clutching what could only be wedding invitations. "Dad," she practically burst through my front door. "We have something wonderful to show you." Derek followed more slowly, his eyes already scanning my modest home with that familiar expression of polite disappointment. The furniture was comfortable but not expensive. The decorations tasteful but unremarkable, perfect for maintaining my carefully crafted image. "Mr. Wood." Dear Eric's handshake was firm but brief. "Hope we're not interrupting your afternoon activities." "Afternoon activities?" As if I spent my days watching television and napping. "Not at all," I replied cheerfully. "What brings you both here?" Nancy produced an elegant cream envelope with flourishes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The official wedding invitation. "You're the first person to see it." I opened it carefully, admiring the calligraphy and heavy card stock. "This is beautiful, sweetheart. June 15th, Lakeshore Country Club. Very elegant." "Derek chose the venue," Nancy said proudly. "It's where all the important Technova events are held." Derek puffed up slightly. "Location matters for occasions like this. My boss will be attending along with several board members. I wanted somewhere that reflects." He gestured vaguely at my living room. "Professional standards." "Sounds impressive," I said, setting the invitation on my coffee table. I should probably start thinking about what to wear. This was dear Eric's moment, and he seized it with enthusiasm. "Actually, Mr. Wood, that's something I wanted to discuss." His tone shifted to what he probably thought was tactful concern. "My boss will be at the wedding, Walter Klein. Very influential person in our industry. Perhaps you should dress. How should I put this? More presentably than usual." Nancy shot him a warning look, but dear Eric was committed to his mission of improving his future father-in-law's appearance. "I have a perfectly good suit," I said mildly. "I'm sure you do." Dear Eric's eyes swept over my casual slacks and cardigan. "Walter expects a certain level of sophistication from the families of his employees. First impressions matter enormously in business. Walter expects sophistication." If only Derek knew that Walter and I had been splitting pizza and working 20-hour days when sophistication meant remembering to wear matching socks. "Don't worry, son," I replied with what I hoped was reassuring simplicity. "I know how to handle bosses." Derek's expression suggested he doubted this claim entirely. "Walter Klein is a very influential person in our industry, Mr. Wood. He's built Technova from nothing into a major corporation. Men like that notice everything. How you dress, how you speak, how you carry yourself. Built from nothing. Walter would appreciate that description considering we literally started with nothing but determination and credit card debt." "Really?" I kept my voice carefully neutral. "It'll be interesting to meet him." Something in my tone must have struck Derek as insufficiently odd because he leaned forward earnestly. "Mr. Wood, I'm not trying to be difficult, but this wedding represents my professional future, too. Walter's opinion of my family connections could affect my career trajectory. I need everyone to make the right impression." The right impression. Translation: I needed to look successful enough to reflect well on Derek, but not so successful as to overshadow him. "What kind of impression are you hoping for?" I asked. "Respectable, conservative, someone who understands the value of hard work and traditional values." Derek's voice carried the patronizing tone of someone explaining simple concepts to a slow child. "Walter appreciates people who've earned their place through dedication and merit." Earned their place through dedication and merit, like spending 30 years building a company from scratch. Perhaps Nancy sensed the undercurrent of tension. "Dad, maybe we should look at your suit together. I could help you pick out a nice tie." "That's very thoughtful, dear." I smiled at my daughter, genuinely touched by her attempt to bridge the gap between her father and fiancé. I'm sure I can find something appropriate. Derek wasn't quite finished with his improvement project. The important thing is projecting dignity. Mr. Woodwalter has very traditional ideas about family values and personal responsibility. He believes people should present themselves with pride regardless of their circumstances. Regardless of their circumstances. The phrase hung in the air like an elegant insult wrapped in silk and tied with good intentions. I understand completely. I said personal presentation says a lot about character. Exactly. Dear Eric beamed, pleased that his lesson had been absorbed. Character matters more than bank accounts to men like Walter. He can spot authentic quality from across a room. Authentic quality. Walter certainly could spot it. We'd been recognizing it in each other for 30 years. Nancy suggested we move to the garden, claiming she wanted to show Derek my tomato plants. Nancy led me through the sliding glass door into my small backyard garden, leaving Derek inside, studying the wedding seating chart she'd conveniently left on my dining table. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neat rows of vegetables I'd been cultivating since retirement. Dad. Nancy's voice carried a weight I hadn't heard since she was 16, and trying to explain why she'd borrowed my car without permission. What are you planning? I settled onto the wooden bench I'd built last summer, gesturing for her to join me. Planning, just trying to be a good host to my future son-in-law. Don't. Nancy sat down, but turned to face me directly. I've known you my entire life. You're up to something, and it involves Derek, and I need to know what it is. Through the glass door, I could see Derek hunched over the seating charts, probably calculating the optimal positioning relative to Walter's table. The irony was almost too perfect. Sweetheart, sometimes people need time to show their true nature. What does that mean? NY's voice sharpened with frustration. Why won't you tell Derek the truth about Technova? Why are you letting him think you're some unemployed old man who needs career advice? There it was. My daughter was far more perceptive than Derek gave her credit for. You know about Technova? I asked carefully. I've always known, Dad. Maybe not the details, but I knew you didn't just work there. You helped create it. Those photographs in your study, the awards you think I don't notice. The way Walter talks about you when he calls. NY's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why are you lying to the man I'm going to marry? I reached over and took her hand. Her engagement ring caught the sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the garden dirt. I'm not lying, Nancy. I'm just not volunteering information. That's the same thing, is it? I squeezed her fingers gently. Has dear Eric asked about my background? Really? Asked with genuine curiosity about who I am as a person. Nancy opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew dear Eric had made assumptions based on my appearance and current lifestyle, never bothering to dig deeper. But this isn't fair. NY's voice cracked slightly. He doesn't know he's being tested. Life isn't fair, sweetheart. People judge each other every day based on surface impressions. The question is, what kind of person does Derek become when he thinks he has the upper hand? Through the glass, dear Eric was now pacing while talking on his phone, probably updating someone about his boss attending the wedding. His gestures were animated, self-important. You saw how he treated me at dinner, I continued quietly. The condescension, the unsolicited advice, the casual dismissal of anyone he perceives as unsuccessful. Is that the man you want to spend your life with? Nancy was quiet for a long moment, watching Derek through the window. He's not always like that. When we're alone, he's different, kinder. I'm sure he is. But character isn't what we do when it's easy, Nancy. It's what we do when we think nobody important is watching. So, you're preparing some kind of lesson for him? NY's voice mixed concern with reluctant curiosity. What happens at the wedding when he finds out? I smiled, feeling the familiar satisfaction of a well-laid plan. He gets to learn that assumptions can be dangerous, that treating people with respect isn't about their bank balance or job title, that kindness shouldn't be conditional on social status. And if he doesn't learn, if he gets angry or embarrassed, then you'll know exactly who you're marrying. I turned to look at my daughter directly. Nancy, I'm not trying to sabotage your happiness. I'm trying to protect it. Better to see his true character now than discover it 5 years into marriage. Nancy stared at her hands, turning the engagement ring slowly around her finger. You want me to keep this secret until the wedding? I want you to watch, really watch how Derek treats people he thinks are beneath him. Watch how he talks about Walter, about success, about what makes someone worthy of respect. I paused. And then decide for yourself what kind of life you want. What if I decide Derek is exactly who I thought he was? Then I'll dance at your wedding and welcome him to the family with genuine joy. I meant every word. But Nancy, make sure you're seeing him clearly, not just seeing what you hope is there. Nancy stood up, brushing dirt from her jeans. Through the glass, Derek was ending his phone call, looking around for us with mild impatience. "He's going to hate you when he finds out," she said quietly. "Probably. The question is, will he hate himself for how he's treated me?" Nancy looked at me for a long moment, wrestling with loyalties and uncertainties. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad. I'll keep your secret, but promise me you're not doing this just for revenge." "I promise you, sweetheart, everything I'm doing is because I love you." Derek appeared at the sliding door, tapping his watch. "Nancy, we should probably head out soon. I have a conference call with the West Coast team in an hour." "Coming," Nancy called back, then looked at me one more time. "Just be gentle with him, okay? Whatever you're planning." I stood up and kissed her forehead. Gentle lessons are rarely the ones that stick. The months between March and June passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of preparation. While Derek continued his condescending check-ins, and Nancy maintained our agreed-upon silence, I methodically arranged every detail of the most educational wedding gift of Derek's young life. 3 days before the wedding, I stood in Armando's custom tailoring on Michigan Avenue, studying myself in the three-way mirror. The charcoal gray suit was impeccably cut, but deliberately understated, expensive enough to command respect, conservative enough to avoid suspicion. "The fit is perfect, Mr. Wood," Armando said, adjusting the jacket's shoulders with practiced precision. "This suit will emphasize your dignity without screaming about price tags." "That's exactly the point," I replied, admiring how the subtle pinstripes caught the light. "The important thing is that it says the right things without words." "Ah, you understand elegance." Armando smiled approvingly. "True quality speaks in whispers, not shouts." 2 days before the wedding, I visited Cartwright & Associates jewelry store in the Gold Coast district. The sales associate, a sharp woman in her 40s, spread several options across black velvet. "These Technova logo cufflinks are quite striking," she said, holding up a pair of platinum pieces with the company's distinctive diamond chip T. "Custom ordered, I assume." "A small commemorative piece," I said, fastening them to my shirt cuffs. They caught the store's lighting beautifully, subtle enough to appear understated, distinctive enough for Walter to recognize immediately. "Excellent choice. They suggest success without ostentation." The day before the wedding, I met with Jonathan Pierce, my private banker at First National. His corner office overlooked Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the endless blue horizon. Such a substantial amount for a wedding gift. Jonathan raised his eyebrows as he reviewed the transfer documents. "Are you absolutely certain about this figure, Porter?" "This is a very special occasion," I replied, signing the authorization with deliberate strokes. "My daughter deserves the finest wedding gift possible. $50,000 is certainly generous, even by your standards." Jonathan processed the paperwork efficiently. "Cash or certified check?" "Certified check. I want the amount clearly visible when it's presented." That evening I walked along the Lake Michigan shoreline, my usual route for serious thinking. The water stretched endlessly eastward, its surface rippling with late afternoon sunlight. Tomorrow's rehearsal dinner would begin the final act of Derek's education. I thought about Walter's likely reaction when he spotted the Technova cufflinks. Walter had suggested those exact cufflinks as company gifts 3 years ago. He'd remember them instantly. The moment of recognition would be worth 30 years of patience. Derek had spent months preparing his boss for the wedding of a hard-working employee to the daughter of an unfortunate old man. Walter would arrive expecting to make polite conversation with Derek's down-on-his-luck future father-in-law, perhaps offer some charitable words about the dignity of honest labor. Instead, he'd discover his co-founders sitting at the family table, wearing their company logo and writing wedding checks that exceeded Derek's annual salary. I stopped walking and stared out at the horizon. The lake was calm today, its surface like glass. Tomorrow would bring storms, but sometimes storms were necessary to clear the air. My phone buzzed with a text from Nancy. "Rehearsal dinner tomorrow at 6 p.m. Derek's very excited about you meeting Walter. Still time to change your mind about this, Dad." I typed back, "Looking forward to it, sweetheart. Everything will work out exactly as it should." Which was true. Derek would get exactly what he'd been asking for, a chance to show his true character in front of the people who mattered most. He'd demonstrate his values, his priorities, his definition of human worth. The only difference would be the audience's reaction. I turned and headed back toward my car, feeling the satisfaction of a plan approaching perfect execution. Tomorrow night, Derek would discover that assumptions could be expensive. By Sunday, he'd learned that respect shouldn't be conditional on perceived social status. The gentle waves lapped against the shore behind me, steady and inexorable as time itself. The Drake Hotel's marble lobby gleamed under crystal chandeliers as I walked through the revolving doors. My reflection multiplying in polished surfaces. 20 minutes earlier I'd driven from Evanston with the satisfaction of a chess player preparing checkmate. Tomorrow would bring revelation, but tonight offered one final opportunity to observe Derek's character. The rehearsal was set in the hotel's small chapel, an intimate space with mahogany pews and stained glass windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. Nancy stood near the altar in her rehearsal dress, radiant despite the tension I could read in her shoulders. She caught my eye and offered a nervous smile, the look of someone keeping a significant secret. Derek emerged from a cluster of his Techna colleagues, straightening his tie with the self-important gesture I'd grown to recognize. His voice carried across the chapel as he spotted me. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet NY's father." Derek's tone held that familiar condescension amplified by the presence of his professional audience. "This is Porter Wood, a retiree lives modestly in Evanston." Lives modestly, the phrase hung in the air like expensive incense meant to establish social hierarchy for his colleagues' benefit. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Wood," said a woman in an expensive blazer. "Derek's told us you're enjoying retirement." "Very much so," I replied, shaking her hand. Though retirement can be educational, Derek's colleagues nodded politely, their interest already waning. In their world, retirees were background noise, pleasant enough, but irrelevant to serious conversation. "Dad has simple tastes," Derek continued, his voice carrying just enough volume for nearby guests to overhear. "Nothing wrong with that, of course. Different generations, different expectations, different expectations." I felt my jaw tighten slightly, the first crack in my carefully maintained composure. "Derek," I said quietly. "Be careful with judgments. Tomorrow might bring surprises." He laughed, the sound carrying more confidence than wisdom. "Mr. Wood, you don't need to lecture me about people. I read character professionally. It's essential in sales. We'll see." The two words dropped between us like stones in distilled water. Something in my tone made Derek pause, but his colleagues were watching, and backing down would damage his carefully constructed image. "What I mean is," Derek pressed on, "success leaves clear indicators. How someone dresses, where they live, what they drive. These things reveal priorities and capabilities." Interesting theory. It's not theory. It's observation. Take Walter Klein, my boss, arriving tomorrow. You can spot his quality from across a room. That's earned respect, not accident. Earned respect. Walter would find that description amusing, considering we'd earned our respect together, sleeping on office floors and living on pizza for 3 years. Nancy moved closer, sensing danger. "Maybe we should focus on tomorrow's ceremony." But Derek was warming to his theme, emboldened by his audience. "The point is, Mr. Wood, that character shows in choices. Walter chose excellence at every step. Others," he gestured vaguely in my direction. "Others choose comfort over achievement." Comfort over achievement. The insult was precise, surgical, designed to wound without seeming overtly cruel. "You're very confident in your assessments," I said, my voice carrying the first edge of steel. "Confidence comes from accuracy. I've never misjudged someone's capabilities." Derek's smile suggested he just won an important point. "Never. Not once. People reveal themselves quickly if you know what to look for." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 4 months' patience crystallizing into cold purpose. The chapel fell quiet, conversations pausing as guests sensed approaching conflict. "Derek, you're absolutely right about one thing," I said, buttoning my jacket with deliberate care. "Character does show in choices." "Exactly my point. Tomorrow you'll have several opportunities to demonstrate yours." Derek's confidence flickered slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, walking toward the chapel exit, "that assumptions can be expensive, especially when they're made in front of people who matter. Mr. Wood, I don't appreciate." "Good night, Derek." I paused at the chapel door, looking back at the assembled guests. "Enjoy your rehearsal. Tomorrow promises to be memorable." Nancy started after me. "Dad, wait. See you tomorrow, sweetheart. Everything will be exactly as it should be." I walked through the hotel lobby with measured steps, past the doorman's respectful nod into the cool Chicago evening. Behind me, I could hear Derek's voice resuming its confident pitch, probably explaining my departure to his colleagues as evidence of an old man's fragile ego. Let him talk. Tomorrow morning, those same colleagues would witness the most educational experience of Derek Harrington's professional life. My car was waiting in the hotel's circular drive. As I settled behind the wheel, I caught a glimpse of the chapel through the hotel's windows. Derek gesturing animatedly, Nancy watching the door where I disappeared, the wedding party resuming their positions. Tomorrow would bring justice. Tonight brought the sweet anticipation of a plan, reaching perfect fruition. The drive from downtown Chicago to Evanston gave me 30 minutes to transform the sharp anger of confrontation into the calm determination of justice. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Eric's latest insults had crystallized into final confirmation that tomorrow's lesson was not just justified, it was necessary. I sat in my darkened car for a moment, staring at my modest house. 4 months ago, Derek had dismissed the same home as evidence of my failure. Tomorrow, he'd learned that success wasn't always displayed in mansion size or luxury car brands. Inside, I went straight to my study and opened the laptop. Walter had sent an email earlier. Looking forward to meeting your future son-in-law tomorrow. Derek sounds like an ambitious young man. Ambitious? That was one word for it. I typed back, tomorrow you'll meet someone very interesting at the wedding, Walter. His response came within minutes. Who would that be? My future son-in-law. I think you'll have much to discuss about character and professional development. Intriguing. Should I be prepared for anything specific? Just be yourself, old friend. Your natural wisdom will be sufficient. I closed the laptop and moved to my bedroom, where tomorrow's wedding outfit hung perfectly pressed. The charcoal suit looked dignified but unremarkable, exactly the impression I wanted until the moment of revelation. The Technova cufflinks sat in their velvet box, waiting to catch Walter's attention at precisely the right moment. From my desk drawer, I retrieved the certified check I picked up yesterday. $50,000 made out to Nancy and Derek Harrington. The amount was carefully chosen, generous enough to demonstrate substantial wealth, large enough to shock Derek's presumptions about my modest circumstances. I thought about tonight's rehearsal, Derek's confident declaration that he'd never misjudged someone's capabilities. The arrogance had been breathtaking, even by his standards. But it was perfect. Tomorrow's humiliation would be complete, precisely because his confidence was so absolute. My phone buzzed with a text from Nancy. Dad, are you okay? Derek feels bad about tonight. I typed back. Derek feels exactly what he should feel. Tomorrow will clarify everything for everyone. I'm worried about what you're planning. Don't worry, sweetheart. Justice is rarely as harsh as people fear. She didn't respond, probably wrestling with the same conflicted loyalties that had troubled her since our garden conversation. Part of her wanted to warn Derek to soften tomorrow's blow, but a larger part understood that some lessons could only be learned through experience. I walked to my study window and looked out at the quiet street. My neighbors were settling in for the evening, reading, watching television, living the comfortable retired lives Derek imagined were my only option. None of them knew that tomorrow would bring the most satisfying moment of my professional life. Walter's confusion had been perfect. He genuinely had no idea what awaited him at the wedding. When he spotted the Technova cufflinks, when Derek introduced me as NY's unemployed father, when the moment of recognition finally came, Walter's expression would be worth 30 years of partnership. I reviewed Derek's behavior one final time. The restaurant condescension, the career advice, the dismissal of dead weight employees. Tonight's lecture about character revealing itself through choices. Every insult had been carefully catalogued, every assumption documented. Tomorrow Derek would discover that character did indeed reveal itself through choices, and his choices had revealed far more than he intended. I prepared for bed with the methodical calm of a surgeon before a complex operation. Everything was ready. The suit, the cufflinks, the check, the perfect venue with Derek's boss and colleagues as witnesses. Nancy knew enough to stay out of the way when the moment came. As I turned off the bedside lamp, I felt the deep satisfaction of a plan approaching flawless execution. Derek had spent months demonstrating his values, his priorities, his definition of human worth. Tomorrow he'd learn that assumptions about success could be extremely costly, especially when those assumptions were made in front of the people who actually controlled his professional future. Sleep came easily, filled with dreams of justice finally served. The morning of June 15th dawned crisp and clear, Chicago skyline gleaming under perfect wedding weather. I dressed with the careful attention of an actor preparing for his most important performance, fastening the Technova cufflinks with particular satisfaction. Today these small platinum symbols would speak louder than any words. The Drake Hotel buzzed with wedding activity when I arrived at noon. Nancy was upstairs in the bridal suite, probably managing her nervous energy with final dress adjustments. I made my way to the small chapel where guests were beginning to gather. Walter stood near the front, distinguished in his navy suit, scanning the assembled crowd with the curious interest of someone meeting his employee's new family. He spotted me across the chapel and nodded politely, a stranger acknowledging another stranger at a mutual acquaintance's wedding. Derek emerged from a side room, resplendent in his formal wear, his confidence radiating like expensive cologne. He was scanning the crowd, too, probably ensuring Walter had the best possible view of the ceremony. When his eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of uncertainty. Last night's confrontation still echoing. Mr. Wood, Derrick approached with forced joviality. Glad you decided to come after our discussion last night. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied. This promises to be unforgettable. Derrick's smile tightened slightly, but he was too focused on today's performance to dwell on cryptic warnings. His colleagues from Technova had claimed seats in the third row, perfect witnesses for whatever was about to unfold. The processional music began, and I took my position near the chapel entrance. Nancy appeared at the top of the aisle, radiant in her grandmother's restored wedding dress, her face glowing with nervous joy. She tucked her arm through mine, and for a moment the elaborate revenge plot faded into simple paternal pride. You look beautiful, sweetheart, I whispered as we began our walk. Thank you, Dad. Her voice carried a tremor of emotion and anticipation for everything. We moved down the aisle at the traditional measured pace, guests rising in respectful acknowledgement. Derrick stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on Nancy with genuine affection that reminded me why she'd fallen in love with him. Walter watched from his front row seat, probably calculating the appropriate level of enthusiasm for his employee's wedding. The officiant, a distinguished man in formal robes, raised his hands as we reached the altar. Who gives this woman in marriage? I do, I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the chapel. Her father with great love and hope for her happiness. Nancy squeezed my hand before releasing it, and I formally placed her hand in Derrick's. For a moment, the three of us stood together, father, daughter, and son-in-law, while the chapel watched in reverent silence. Be happy, dear, I whispered to Nancy, kissing her cheek before taking my seat in the front row. The ceremony proceeded with traditional dignity. Derrick and Nancy exchanged vows with obvious sincerity. Their words carrying genuine emotion despite the undercurrents of tension. I found myself genuinely moved by their declarations of love and commitment, even as I anticipated the education that would follow. Walter sat 2 seats away, occasionally glancing in my direction with polite curiosity. Soon enough that curiosity would transform into something far more interesting. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and Derrick kissed Nancy with the enthusiasm of a man who believed his future was perfectly secure. The chapel erupted in applause, guests rising to celebrate the new couple as wedding bells chimed from the hotel's sound system. As the recessional began, I noticed Derrick scanning the crowd again, his eyes finding Walter with obvious satisfaction. He'd successfully married the woman he loved in front of his professional mentor, having navigated the potential embarrassment of his unemployed father-in-law without incident. The receiving line formed in the chapel's vestibule, guests offering congratulations as Nancy and Derrick beamed with newlywed joy. I positioned myself appropriately as father of the bride, accepting well wishes and compliments about the beautiful ceremony. Derrick was in his element now, introducing Nancy to his colleagues with obvious pride. My wife, he kept saying, savoring the new title. His confidence had returned completely. Last night's confrontation forgotten in the glow of wedding success. Through the crowd, I saw Walter approaching the receiving line, probably preparing to offer appropriate congratulations to his employee's new family. The moment I'd been orchestrating for 4 months was finally at hand. Derrick spotted Walter's approach and straightened unconsciously. The ambitious employee preparing to impress his boss one final time. The hotel's banquet hall sparkled under crystal chandeliers, transformed into an elegant reception space during the 2 hours between ceremony and celebration. Guests mingled with champagne glasses, their conversations mixing with soft jazz from the hotel's string quartet. I positioned myself near the bar, watching Derrick work the room with practiced enthusiasm. Walter stood by the floor-tossy isling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, his distinguished profile outlined against the afternoon sunlight. He'd spent the ceremony observing politely, probably calculating the appropriate level of engagement with his employee's new family. Soon that calculation would become irrelevant. Derrick approached Walter with the calculated confidence of an ambitious subordinate, NY's hand tucked proudly through his arm. This was his moment, introducing his beautiful new wife to the man who controlled his professional future while demonstrating his superior social connections. Mr. Clean. Derrick's voice carried perfectly across the reception noise. I'd like you to meet my wife, Nancy, and her father. I moved closer, timing my approach with the precision of a watchmaker. 4 months of patience were about to pay dividends that would compound for years. Walter turned with polite interest, extending his hand to Nancy. Congratulations, my dear. Derrick speaks of you constantly. Thank you, Mr. Clean. Derrick admires you tremendously. Derrick beamed at this exchange, his chest visibly swelling with pride. Then he gestured toward me with casual condescension. And this is my father-in-law, Porter Wood. Derrick's tone shifted subtly, carrying just enough dismissal to establish hierarchy. He's an unemployed retiree, lives modestly in Evston. The words hung in the air like expensive perfume, obvious to everyone within hearing distance. Several of Eric's colleagues had drifted closer, probably expecting another demonstration of their rising star's social superiority. Walter's head turned toward me slowly, his executive-trained composure slipping for just a moment. His eyes found my face, then dropped immediately to my cufflinks. The Technova logo caught the chandelier light perfectly, platinum and diamond spelling out 30 years of partnership. Porter. Walter's voice carried genuine shock. Porter Wood. Derek blinked, clearly not expecting this level of recognition. You know him? Know him? Walter's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from nearby conversations. Porter, what in blazes are you doing here? Attending my daughter's wedding, I replied calmly, extending my hand. Good to see you, Walter. You look well. Eric's face cycled through confusion, suspicion, and growing alarm. Mr. Klein, I think there might be some mistake. This is just NY's father. He's unemployed. Walter stared at Derek as if he just announced his intention to become a professional circus performer. Unemployed? Derek? This is Porter Wood, co-founder of Technova Innovations, my business partner for 30 years. The words hit Derek like physical blows. I watched his face transform from confident superiority to dawning horror, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Around us, conversations had stopped entirely. Wedding guests sensing drama more compelling than small talk. Partner? Eric's voice cracked slightly. That's impossible. He's just what? Walter's tone had shifted from surprise to something considerably less friendly. Just the man who built our company from nothing. Just the genius who created half our core technologies. Just my closest friend and business colleague. Derek turned to stare at me, his face pale beneath his wedding tan. You're really co-founder and primary shareholder of Technova Innovations. I confirmed quietly. The company where you've spent 3 years explaining to me how business really works. Nancy moved closer to Derek, her face a mixture of sympathy and anxiety. She'd known this moment was coming, but couldn't have prepared for the public devastation written across her new husband's features. Walter's executive instincts were kicking in now, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to difficult personnel decisions. Derek, exactly what have you been saying to my business partner? Derek's mouth worked soundlessly, his confident wedding day persona crumbling like expensive paper in rain. The colleagues who'd been impressed by his networking skills were now witnessing the most spectacular professional implosion in Technova's 30-year history. I didn't know, Derek finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. He never told me. Walter's expression suggested this explanation was entirely insufficient. Eric's face had gone from wedding day glow to surgical sweet polar in less than 30 seconds. Around us, the reception had transformed from elegant celebration to riveting spectacle. Guests forming a loose circle around our group like spectators at an unexpected street performance. Mr. Klein, please. I didn't know. Derek's voice carried the desperation of a man watching his career evaporate in real time. He never told me he worked at Technova. Worked at? Walter's eyebrows rose with dangerous calm. Derek, Porter doesn't work at Technova. Porter is Technova. Half the patents on our core technologies bear his signature. The information hit Derek like successive physical blows. I could almost see him calculating the full scope of his mistake. Every condescending comment, every piece of unsolicited advice, every moment of casual dismissal playing back in devastating clarity. I can explain everything. Eric's voice cracked as he turned between Walter and me with frantic energy. There's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Walter's voice had acquired the steel that made him formidable in boardroom negotiations, is how my senior sales manager could treat my business partner like a charity case for 4 months without anyone telling me. Nancy moved protectively toward Derek, her wedding dress wrestling against the growing tension. Mr. Clean, Derek honestly didn't know. Dad never mentioned the company connection. Your father shouldn't have needed to mention it, Walter replied, his attention fixed on Derek with laser intensity. Basic human respect isn't conditional on someone's job title or bank balance. Derek was spiraling now, his hands gesturing wildly as words tumbled out without coherent structure. The thing is, Mr. Klein, I always treat people with respect. Always. I was just trying to help, offering guidance, career advice. Career advice? Walter's voice could have frozen the champagne. You offered career advice to the man who created your job? The nearby guests were no longer pretending to have other conversations. Derek's Technova colleagues stood frozen, probably calculating their own professional distances from the unfolding disaster. The hotel staff had quietly positioned themselves around the perimeter, uncertain whether to intervene or simply document the entertainment. Derek, Walter continued with the methodical precision of an experienced executioner. Explain to me how someone demonstrates respect by calling their business partner unemployed, dead weight. Derek's eyes widened with pure panic. I never said that. I would never. Monday morning, Walter's voice cut through Dear Eric's protests like a surgical blade. You can explain your definition of respect to human resources. You can also start looking for new employment. No. Dear Eric's composure shattered completely. Mr. Clean, please. This is my wedding day. I made a mistake, but I can fix this. The mistake, Walter replied coldly, was mine. For promoting someone who judges people by their appearance rather than their character. Dear Eric's face had progressed from pale to gray, his breathing shallow and rapid. Nancy reached for his arm, but he was too far gone in panic to notice comfort. Around us, the wedding reception had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of assumptions. There has to be something I can do, Derek pleaded, his voice breaking like an adolescent's. Some way to make this right. I'll apologize publicly. Take a demotion. Anything. Walter looked at Derek with the expression of someone discovering mold in expensive wine. You'll apologize to Porter certainly. Whether that changes anything remains to be seen. Dear Eric's head snapped toward me with desperate hope, his eyes wide with the kind of panic reserved for people watching everything they'd worked for disappear simultaneously. The confident young executive who'd lectured me about business success had been replaced by someone who looked like he might collapse at any moment. Mr. Wood Porter, please. Dear Eric's voice trembled with genuine terror. I know I made mistakes, but I can learn. I can change. Please don't let him destroy my career. The moment hung between us like a sword, sharp and gleaming and ready to fall. Dear Eric stood before me with his entire future balanced on the edge of my next words, his face a study in absolute desperation. Nancy watched with tears threatening her wedding makeup, torn between the two men she loved most. Walter waited with the patient intensity of someone prepared to execute a professional death sentence. The wedding guests formed a silent amphitheater around us, their champagne glasses forgotten as they witnessed a moment that would be discussed at Chicago social events for years to come. Walter, I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly in the hushed banquet hall. Wait. Walter's eyebrows rose slightly, but he remained silent, deferring to his partner's judgment, as he had for 3 decades. I looked at Derek, seeing not the arrogant young man who'd condescended to me for months, but someone who just learned the most expensive lesson of his professional life. His hands trembled slightly as he waited for my verdict. Derek, I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm, look at me. He raised his eyes, and I saw genuine remorse there. Not just fear for his career, but actual understanding of what he'd done wrong. I accept your apology, I continued, watching relief flood his features. But I have one condition for my forgiveness. Anything, Dear Eric whispered. Absolutely anything. Never again judge someone's worth by the size of their paycheck or the label on their clothes. I paused, letting the words sink in. Character isn't measured in dollar signs, and respect shouldn't depend on bank statements. Derek nodded vigorously, tears of relief and genuine remorse mixing in his eyes. I understand. I promise. I've learned my lesson. I turned to Walter, who was watching our exchange with the careful attention of someone evaluating a critical business decision. Walter, Derek made assumptions based on incomplete information. We've all done that at various points in our careers. Walter's expression softened slightly, though his executive instincts remained engaged. Are you asking me to overlook 4 months of disrespect toward my business partner? I'm asking you to consider that sometimes the best lessons come from mercy rather than punishment. I place my hand on Derek's shoulder. Derek has a good track record at the company. His sales numbers speak for themselves. Perhaps this experience will make him a better manager, not just a more careful one. Dear Eric looked between Walter and me with the expression of someone watching his entire future being negotiated by forces beyond his control. Nancy stepped closer, her hand finding Dear Eric's arm in a gesture of support and solidarity. Walter studied Derek for a long moment, his businessman's instincts wearing with his respect for his partner's judgment. Finally, he nodded slowly. Derek. Walter's voice carried formal authority, but had lost its sharp edge. You'll keep your position, but you're on probation for 6 months. Any hint of the attitudes Porter described. And you're gone. Understood? Completely? Derek managed, his voice thick with gratitude and exhaustion. Thank you, Mr. Klein. Thank you both. I extended my hand to Derek, and he shook it with the grip of someone sealing a sacred covenant. Welcome to the family, son, I said quietly. Try to remember that everyone deserves respect until they prove otherwise. I will, Derek promised. I absolutely will. Nancy stepped forward and embraced both of us simultaneously, her joy evident despite the traumatic revelation. Around us, The wedding guests began to relax, conversations resuming as the drama resolved into something resembling family harmony. Walter clapped me on the shoulder, his familiar grin returning. 30 years, and you can still surprise me, partner. Retirement keeps life interesting, I replied. The string quartet, sensing the crisis had passed, resumed their gentle melodies. Champagne glasses were raised again. Conversations returned to normal wedding topics, and Derek learned that sometimes the most important lessons come wrapped in unexpected packages. As the reception continued around us, I watched Derek interact with other guests, noting the subtle changes in his demeanor. The edge of superiority had been replaced by something that looked remarkably like humility. Sometimes justice served with wisdom tasted sweeter than revenge.